Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you all for being here this morning. One day you won't say that, but I'm so glad you said it this morning. I'm teasing you, Jinx. Thank you all for being here this morning. People here are working so hard to do so much, to make so many things happen, and doing the hard work of helping us all find each other again after the long 2 years that we have lived. So I want to start just by saying thank you. And the reason we do that is because this can be good. Life at its root can be good. And we can be good in it. Morally good and just in our spirits good. Feeling good. Whatever happens, yes, sir, yes, we can. So let's begin this beautiful morning just with goodness. Stand and sing with me.
Good morning. My name is Seher Kul, and I serve on the Board of Trustees at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spartanburg. It is my delight to welcome you all this morning, whether you're here at the UUCS or virtually. This is a welcoming congregation where everyone is welcome just as we each are. Let me share with you a few important announcements. You can find these and more on the sheet titled Connect, accompanying your bulletin this morning. This Sunday, May 1st, following the morning service, we will dedicate our new elevator. Yes. We have all contributed in large and small ways to make this dream a reality during the pandemic, and the elevator is finally complete. Come celebrate this momentous accomplishments by our congregation. I had another announcement here to make. There are adult and kids beverages for this celebration, and please parents make sure that the kids get the kids' ones. It would make for a fun morning. Okay. We will hold our next consciousness dialogue on Sunday, May 15, following the morning service. This is a change from the previously announcement date of May 1st to make space for the celebration of the elevator. Our focus will be the intersection of the work of Good Neighbor Social Justice Team and our efforts to be more anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural as a congregation. We will also share information about how to engage in the work of voting justice for our congregation through the summer in preparation for this fall's elections. Please come. All are welcome to join in our ongoing congregational dialogue. Mark your calendars for these important dates in the democratic life of our congregation. On Thursday, May 26th at 6 p.m. via Zoom, our board will hold a budget and bylaw amendment question and answer session. Come to learn more about what we will be voting on at the annual meeting this June. Watch the happenings email for the Zoom link as the date approaches. On Sunday, June 5th, following our morning service, we will hold our congregational annual meeting in the sanctuary. Hear year-end reports from our leaders and cast your votes for next year. More information is to come about absentee voting for those unable to attend in person. Thank you for making this place of warmth and kindness. Every time we gather across all of our differences. Thank you, everyone.
Good morning. I'm Clemson Tarragano. I have the privilege of serving as your worship associate this morning. And our lighting of the chalice reading comes from C.G. Jung. You can hardly say of your soul what sex it is, but if you pay close attention, you will see that the most masculine man has a feminine soul, and the most feminine woman has a masculine soul. Thus says C.G. Jung. Please join us in singing hymn number 8, Mother Spirit, Father Spirit. Please stand as you are willing and able, and sing out as you are willing and able. Hymn number 8, Mother Spirit, Father Spirit. So today we talk about the divine. And in taking our hands and let us work to shape our art, I was wondering, how do you create the divine? And so I went to that fount of all knowledge, the divine Google. And in it, I found the inspiring words of Christine Hassler, and she offers letting go of expectations, releasing attachments to the way we think we should be, quieting the voice of our ego so we can hear the voice of inner wisdom, making changes that might be scary and facing uncertainty with faith, and being of service to others that Spirit places in our lives in often unexpected ways. And so with our rippling bowl, we let go of expectations of fear by placing a rock or shell in the water. We release attachments to sorrow as that shell or rock drops. We hear from inner wisdom as we ponder our success and share in that joy. Letting go of that sorrow or enhancing the thrill of our joy helps us make those changes that can be both scary and exciting. And we are in service to others as we lessen our burdens and share our joys in community. So we ask you to please come forward and lessen your sorrow, share your joy, and help create the divine in all of us. And I'll place a shell in the water for our friends online, one for our joys and one for our sorrows, as they join us in creating our divine. Now, as we continue our journey into the divine, we're going to share our covenant. And as we recite our covenant together, please keep in mind the words of another great philosopher, Robin Carter, as she shares her thoughts about our community. Thus says Robin, "When we have unity of vision and approach teamwork with humility, patience, and love, it becomes the fuel that allows us to achieve even more." Please join me in our divine vision of unity. We are a people of faith and hope. Together we covenant to strive to become our better selves, to honor both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to respond to systems of violence and oppression with the power of a love beyond belief. And of course, at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spartanburg, we are a people of faith and action, seeking to create the divine in all of us. And sometimes that divine is a group activity. So allow me to share a description of our community written by one of our own divine members who shall remain nameless. But this divine member writes, "We are blessed with a kick-ass congregation which shows up and answers transparent leadership with unyielding resolve to get things done, balancing pragmatism and aspiration in a way that I have never seen anywhere else. So now, let us rise and greet these kick-ass people and generate our divine.
I think that would have been a little bit too far for it. But to me, going to help Cynthia get
So how do we respond to systems of violence and oppression with the power of a love beyond belief? Well, we're a giving community. We give to support our church efforts as well as those who take our values in action around the world. And this week, our share of the plate goes to the World Central Kitchen, founded in 2010 during the Haiti earthquake by world-renowned chef Jose Andres. Now, in March, we responded to the violent invasion of Ukraine and the scenes of mothers and children fleeing for safety by contributing over $3,800 to the Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund by Global Giving. So many of us want to do more, and so the May Share the Plate is for the World Central Kitchen's work in Ukraine. WCK has a 4-star top rating from Charity Navigator and is on the front lines of humanitarian relief in the Ukraine. Its kitchen in Kiev was just hit by Russian bombs, injuring 4. But their work extends to providing meals to refugees across other nations, and they work in Hungary, Romania, and Poland as well. How do we respond to systems of violence and oppression with the power of a love beyond belief? Our May Share the Plate is for World Central Kitchen's work in the Ukraine.
The meta meditation. We began with expressing love for ourselves. May you be free of suffering. May you be at peace. May you know the joy of your own true nature. May you be healed. May you be a source of healing for all others. May you know love. And we then express love for those of whom we care. May you be free of suffering. May you be at peace. May you know the joy of your own true nature. May you be healed. May you be a source of healing for all others. May you love. We express love for those we find difficult in small ways and in large. May you be free of suffering. May you be at peace. May you know the joy of your own true nature. May you be healed. May you be a source of healing for all others. May you know love. And finally, we express love for all beings. May you be free of suffering. May you be at peace. May you know the joy of your own true nature. May you be healed. May you be a source of healing for all others. May you know love.
It doesn't have to happen. It's okay if it never happens. It's very beautiful when it does happen. When the timbre of each voice and action in a service rings true. Saher's voice, Aaron's voice, Clemson's voice, Cynthia's voice. They all speak so differently, and some don't speak at all. Jay's silent actions of service to help Cynthia. It's like different bells in a hand chime choir ringing. It's so beautiful what we can create together. Join me in silence. The point of all of our ideas is to help us to live. And the test of our ideas, of our words, our vocabularies, our concepts, is if they help us to live. Yesterday we had a little game with the church. I didn't even tell the joke and I got laughter. It makes me wonder what I look like on the softball field that you just instantly laugh. We had a softball game yesterday. It was great. A lot of people showed up, and a lot more could show up. So when we do it again in the late summer or fall, you're all invited, even those shaking their heads no. You're all invited. You will be invited to pick up a bat and a glove, but you do not have to say yes. You can just sit under the tent and enjoy the company. It was a really beautiful morning. How I made it through the field of pollen to last, I have no idea. It was a UU miracle, but it was so much fun. And we have some softball players in our congregation. While we were out there playing against ourselves, because we didn't have enough people to make two teams, so we just took turns playing against ourselves. We never reached the point of having to throw the ball up, hit it, grab a mitt, and then catch it. We had more people than that. But it was a wonderful experiment in sort of competitive cooperation. I don't really know how to describe it. Anyway, while we were playing, there was a story that circulated. And it was of the previous time that we had a church softball game, right before the pandemic, a little bit before the pandemic. And the story recalls a beloved member of this congregation who doesn't live in Spartanburg anymore, but is still very much a part of the life of this congregation, the heart of this congregation. A man named Ed Wild. Some of you know Ed very well. You can tell the story better than I can. And some of us, because of all that has happened in the pandemic and the way life moves, some of us don't know Ed at all. I've never met him. So it's a delight to share just a little bit about Ed with you. But Ed has been living with and wrestling with and in large part defeating Parkinson's for many years now. It's really kind of amazing what he has done, his perseverance and his fortitude. And he's a great baseball fan. Especially Chicago baseball. Well, now you're putting me on the spot. Is it Cubs or White Sox? And I'm going to say the White Sox. Okay. That's always a safe bet, Chuck. I'm going to let you be the one who said it. You never want to tell a Chicago resident who their favorite team is and get it wrong. It goes downhill from there. Anyway, he loves baseball. And so we had the softball game, and Ed was invited to throw out the first pitch. All of this orchestrated by probably the only person in the congregation who loves baseball more than Ed. Right? There you go. See, I'm just going to sit down. You can finish the whole sermon. Mitch Eisner. So Ed comes out to the mound, and he's got the softball, and Mitch is going to catch. And, Ed's in a wheelchair. He's battling Parkinson's. And so Mitch kind of steps in to catch the ball. And Ed said, "Back up." So Mitch took a step back. Ed said, "Mitch," I said, "back up." And Mitch steps back again. "Go back, Mitch." And it's like, okay, whatever, it's fine. If the ball goes in the dirt, I'll just pick it up, it'll be fine. And he backs up 4 times. And he says, "Okay, Ed, throw that pitch." And Ed throws the pitch, and Mitch has to reach out to grab it. Such a great story about the strength of human being and of our will, how we can face any challenge. And the work of that, whatever challenge we're facing, every person in here living with challenge. The work of that, and also the joy of showing up the things that are causing us so much anxiety and concern. That even in whatever disability each of us has, we have the strength to face it and do something with it. And it's a story about Ed's throwing arm. Ed Wild, in many ways, is a man's man. Athletic, smart in those things that we often think of some men being really smart at. Super good at math. A college administrator who saw the growth of his university under his leadership. A person who developed financial means and then managed and used those means wisely and well and with generosity. A great man, a Renaissance man. And the stories of Ed's physical prowess and intellectual ability are legendary, of rocketing back and forth between national UUA committee meetings and UUCS board meetings, helping very different groups of people make really good decisions to sustain the life of this community and other communities. And then of joining his brothers and sisters and siblings to climb up step ladders and paint the ceiling of the fellowship hall. And then to work on the exterior of this building. All of these stories of can do, grab the hammer and go masculinity. Beautiful stories. And my strongest memory of Ed is of his last Sunday in this church. It was, if I remember correctly, Easter the year before the pandemic, 2019. He was going to be moving to be closer to his children so that they could provide more direct care for him. And it was a difficult leave taking because he's so beloved. Been a part of this congregation for so long. In retrospect, it was a very good decision. He has made it through the pandemic brilliantly. But it was hard. It was hard. And after the service here, we were all in the fellowship hall eating way too much, drinking that wonderful mix of adult and children's beverages, coffee. And I was sitting next to Ed, and people were coming up and speaking with him and laughing with him, telling stories, and there were lots of tears. And I remember this moment when another beloved member of this community, person in the heart of this community, Linda Leibel, who was in a leadership role then, was kneeling down beside Ed in his wheelchair and just holding his hand and patting it, expressing gratitude beyond words, deep love. And somehow I was lucky enough to be sitting on the other side just watching this. And Ed, through his Parkinson's, through what it does, not only to his mobility and to his hands, but also to his speech and his ability to find words, he said, "Isn't it wonderful, this liberal religion of ours, that we can be open and loving to all of us, every one of us. Isn't it wonderful?" This man of so much accomplishment and ability, athleticism, success, turning that not to his own benefit over others, but in service to us all. Speaking of the divine masculine, yesterday at the softball game, I watched as Alan Jenkins, who has a pretty amazing first baseline hit, over and over again, cracking the ball down the line. And Joe Mowry, who is quiet and fast, and Andrew Waters, who has a backhand that'll twist even his own elbow out, and Doug Allen, who is the runner you want on base, and Brandon Carter, a god like Adonis himself, stood on this baseball diamond after we were all very sunburned and very thirsty, stood with one younger player in their midst. And Brandon would take the softball and hit it, not powering it over the fence, as I'm sure only he could do yesterday. I know that I tried and did not. Not showing his ability beyond everyone else for his victory and no one else's. But instead, Brandon hitting the ball down into the dirt so that it would roll quick but not so quick that it couldn't be fielded, and fast but not so fast that it would hit something in the sand and pop up. Hitting it with so much skill and mindfulness that that ball over and over again would roll through the infield down the third base line so that a young girl with a baseball glove in her hands could lean down and field those ground balls, pick it up, and throw it back to him to try again. Martha Jenkins, in the company of all of these men, being taught how to play the game, how to field the ball. And let me tell you, Alan can hit, but Martha's got an arm on her. All month, we are going to be talking about the divine masculine. And I just want to tell you, I am terrified. I cannot think of two words that we all have very strong ideas about and that are completely ambiguous when you get into them. It would be enough, as Clemson has already tried to do and succeeded worthily, it would be hard enough to deal with the word divinity in this group of folks, right? Watch out for your job. And it says something about our world that perhaps the only word I can think of, I mean, there's no cuss word that would be harder to work with than this. The only word I can think of that would be harder to work with than divinity in this congregation would be masculinity, right? So charged. So full of meaning. And we all know things about it. We all have uses of the word. It's not at all unfamiliar, and we can quickly conjure images of what we mean by it. But as soon as we try to grasp, what exactly are we talking about? It's full of nuance and ambiguity, full of complexity, and no small amount of it very problematic. This is dangerous ground to tread. It's been fascinating to me since Fred Stoll first asked me to speak about masculinity and being a man as an auction sermon, how this has moved. It's been months since Fred first spoke to me about this, and we planned this. I did not mean to plan it on Mother's Day, but if that's the worst trap that I fall into by my own doing, then I'll be happy. Stay tuned for next week. But Fred and I spoke about this, and then somehow word started to spread through various corners that at some point we're going to be dealing with the question of masculinity, of being men, of the divine masculine. And people have come to me, mostly women, some of our trans folk, very few men, I'm not sure why. Maybe he just didn't get the word. Sharing with me books and ideas and excitement. This will be great. And every time someone would say something very positive, I would say, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. How are we going to handle all of this? And the world that we live in makes it a lot harder. The caricatures of masculinity that we see for the sake of power and gain. All those things that Ed Wild and Brandon Carter and company didn't use their strength and ability for, that we see other people using their positions and their gender identity and their claims on these terms to advance themselves over other people. And we have watched in legislature after legislature across our country this spring the assertion of male dominance over women's rights and trans rights, and pointedly, trans youth's rights. Men beating up teenagers for their own political gain. That's what we're wrestling with. Hard to define, hard to grasp, and very easy to misuse. In our culture that is so grounded in patriarchy and homophobia, heteronormativity, transphobia, this is treacherous ground to tread. And so it seems to me an expression of the divine masculine that when Fred first brought this idea to me, his approach was, what does it mean to be masculine? Is there anything good about being a man at all? I would hasten as a man to say yes. Something anyway. That openness, that vulnerability that Fred first shared, that is the expression that completes the picture, I think. That there is something that brings us into balance. And that balancing is what we want to explore this month. Explore it for men, but also not only for men. This isn't a sermon series for less than half of our congregation. This needs to be something that can speak to us all. And so that is what we are striving with this month. It seems to me that in these complex questions of what is masculinity and what is femininity, what is gender, what is the spectrum of expression that's available to us all, one of the things that we can see, sometimes with great beauty and sometimes with less, is that we complete one another in our relationships. There's a way in which people being together helps us access the fullness of ourselves. I'll give you just an example, kind of a twist on this theme. Look at this sanctuary. Look at the architecture of it. Now, I'm going to use terms to describe something that I think is happening here that I'm not totally satisfied with. These are not terms that are my first choice. But for the sake of the theme and working with these ideas, just bear with me. And what I want you to know throughout all of this is, you're welcome to come up to me at any point and say, Scott Neely, you're full of it, right? I totally disagree with you. I might disagree with myself too, right? But our words and ideas are always trying to catch up to what we're dealing with. And yet they can help us think. So look at this sanctuary. This sanctuary is designed to welcome us, to receive us, to be a place of warmth, to be a place into which we can enter and belong. It's meant not to be hierarchical. It's meant to be a place of beauty and community and love. In many ways, this sanctuary is designed as a very feminine space, according to classical descriptions of the feminine, a place to receive us and to nurture us. And one of the things that happens in this space of welcome and love is that women and non-binary and trans folk are able to come into these doors and stand at this pulpit and lead us to assume a role that in the city that surrounds us is very often violently denied anyone who is not a man. There is a way in which the femininity of this space, to use terms that I think can't keep up with what we're trying to talk about, allows women to assume roles from which they are very often excluded in the surrounding world, to assume a role that all too inadequately could be described in that world outside as masculine. We heard Anne speak about it from this pulpit just last week. The level of misogyny that meets her when she goes in to offer care at the hospital every day, and the difference of her experience in this congregation. That is a big deal. And so the prevalence of female and non-binary and trans leadership in this congregation is something we shouldn't miss. It is a big deal. There's a way in which our relationship with this congregation helps the women and non-binary and trans folks in this congregation step more fully into their full selves. Just think of the leaders in this congregation and what they do. And imagine this world without them leading. What a tragedy of incompleteness that would be. There is a way that in relationship with each other, we help one another step more into completeness, into our fuller selves. And that way of finding greater completeness in each other, it has the capacity to move us into greater completeness inside of ourselves also. To claim the fullness of our being, each one of us, so that we are not depending on another person to help us find ourselves, but that in modeling and relating and through friendship and through love, through all those ways that we relate to each other, we discover things in ourselves and become more and more our full selves. In Jungian psychology, this is the idea of individuation or of integration, of becoming the full self. Jung was writing from Switzerland in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, a century ago. He was writing in a culture that was extremely divided along gender roles, even more so than our own culture. And we've got a lot of it going on still. And in that polarity of gender roles, he identified that men were incomplete when they divorced the aspects of femininity from themselves, and that women were incomplete when they divorced the aspects of masculinity from themselves. It would take all the courage a person could muster to transgress the strict gender roles of his culture. But if a person chose to do that, through their imagination, through their work, through relationship, through courage, they could awaken into a fullness of being the culture could hardly comprehend. I think in many ways that is part, not nearly all, part of what non-binary and trans folks are offering our culture today. That through their choice of themselves to be their fullest self, transgressing norms in our culture, they show us some fuller self that we can each choose to be. I don't mean that we all need to become trans. That's not what I mean. But that we should be authentic. And that when we have been taught as men to dominate, we should choose instead to include. And that we have been taught to compete at everything, we should choose instead cooperation. To intentionally choose those characteristics that we've been taught don't belong to us, to integrate them into our fullness of being. I was watching the end of this softball game yesterday. Brandon Carter standing there, the sun behind him, chiseled physique. He's even a mathematician and a logician. I mean, the embodiment of the god Apollo himself. Robin, anyway, is not going to argue with me, I don't think. Hitting these ground balls to Martha Jenkins. And I was standing in the outfield backing them up, which they didn't need because Martha's good with her mitt. And an image sprang to mind. An image of Martha, but not of Brandon. It reminded me of this sculpture that was illegally placed in the financial district of Wall Street several decades ago now, after a time of recession, of a bull. A symbol of bull markets, right? In classical mythology, there is no symbol of masculinity that is more resonant than a bull. You just look at cultures across the Mediterranean, symbol of power, fertility, military strength, a power almost unwieldy, and productivity. Super masculine image. There's a part of the bull in the financial district that is shinier than the other parts because people like to rub it. It's not the horns. And I don't care what the artist says, I think the message has been clearly understood by the public about what this statue is communicating. And it is surrounded by architecture which typifies our culture. I'm not sure how to do this without losing my job. They go straight up, surrounded by these images of vertical financial power. Freud and Jung spirits come to help me now. This is a hyper-masculine setting. And a few years ago, another sculpture was placed before the bull. Charging bull, fearless girl. This little girl facing down global capitalist power in all of its most potent mythic imagery. The artist who made the bull immediately said, "What? You've put her there illegally," which is exactly how the bull got there to begin with. "She's making my sculpture look like a villain," the artist said. Which raises the question for all of us who have that masculine bent. What is it about ourselves that we are so reluctant to see? And that would deny place to a little girl in order to soothe our own conscience. But I looked at Martha Jenkins fielding that ball. And I looked at that Apollonian god using bat and ball to teach her the game rather than to intimidate or exclude her. Can we choose the fullness of ourselves? The masculine and the feminine, or whatever name we give it. All words and names too inadequate to name. So that what we are generating is place and life and skill for every one of us.
Thank you. In this hymnal, please join in singing hymn number 6, "Just as Long as I Have Breath." And please stand as you're willing and able. And in the instructions, there's in parentheses, it has SLT. That's Sing the Leading Tradition or Sing Loud Today. Just as long as I have breath. As we extinguish our chalice this morning, the words of C.G. Jung, "Where are people?" What about masculinity? Do you know how much femininity man lacks for completeness? Do you know how much masculinity women lack for completeness? You seek the feminine in women and the masculine in men, and thus there are only men and women. But seek and recognize it, but where are people? You, man, should not seek the feminine in women, but seek and recognize it in yourself as you possess it from the beginning. It pleases you to play at manliness, however, because it travels on a well-worn track. You, woman, should not seek the masculine in men, but assume the masculine in yourself because you possess it from the beginning.
The words can hardly keep up with all that is possible within us. And when we bring it out into the world, look at the world we can create.